She helped a shivering man into the shelter, not knowing he was a billionaire, escaping his own wedding. I do not have time to explain. I cannot call the police. They are already looking for me. But I did not do anything wrong. You are shivering in the snow and talking about justice? Get inside. If you are a bad man, I will be the first to know. The wind roared like an angry beast outside the shelter's old wooden door, battering the building with icy gusts. Snow blew sideways in thick curtains, swallowing the town in white. Sarah pressed her hand against the glass pane, squinting through the frost as she checked the street one last time before locking up for the night. It was Christmas Eve, but for her, it felt like any other cold, lonely night. At 32, Sarah looked older than her years. Life had not been gentle. The faint scar near her right eye, the guarded way she spoke, and the habit of checking twice before saying anything personal all pointed to a past filled with regret and betrayal. Once a respected accountant with a promising future, she had spent 6 harrowing months behind bars after being framed in a corporate fraud scandal. She had lost everything, her career, her friends, her reputation, but not her conscience. After her release, she moved far north, bought a run-down building with what little money she had left, and turned it into a small shelter. She called it the Haven, a place for those the world had forgotten. Tonight, only 4 residents were inside, 2 men sleeping on cots in the common room, 1 elderly woman reading by candlelight, and a teenage girl wrapped in a quilt, watching the snow fall through the cracked window. Sarah had just turned off the hallway light when a violent knock rattled the front door. She paused, heart racing, then grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace and stepped cautiously toward the entrance. When she opened it, a blast of cold slammed into her, nearly knocking the breath from her lungs. There, hunched and shivering on the threshold, stood a young man. His hair was soaked, sticking to his forehead, and blood ran in thin streams from a gash above his brow. His overcoat, though clearly once expensive, was torn at the collar and missing buttons. The leather gloves he wore were soaked through and stiff with frost. He looked at her with wild, pleading eyes. "I do not have time to explain. I cannot call the police. They are already looking for me, but I did not do anything wrong." Sarah tightened her grip on the poker but did not raise it. "You are shivering in the snow and talking about justice," she said, voice calm and dry. "Get inside. If you are a bad man, I will be the first to know." She stepped aside. He hesitated only a moment before stumbling in, nearly collapsing onto the floor. She shut the door firmly behind him and locked it. "Sit," she ordered, guiding him toward a bench by the fireplace. "You are bleeding. Do not move." He did not argue. She wrapped him in a blanket and handed him a mug of hot tea, then went to grab the first aid kit. When she returned, he was already trying to unbutton his coat, fingers trembling too much to manage. "Let me," she said, kneeling beside him. The coat peeled back, revealing a designer's suit torn at the sleeve. Beneath the shirt she glimpsed a vest soaked with snow and blood. His shoes, polished leather, were scuffed but clearly handcrafted. She cleaned the wound on his forehead and applied a small bandage. As she worked, she said, "Name?" He hesitated, then, almost like he was deciding to trust her, said, "Thomas. Thomas Whitaker." Sarah's hands paused for a moment, mid-movement. That name. She knew it, not personally, but from headlines, financial journals. Whitaker, tech magnate family, old money, famous scandals. But she said nothing. "Well, Thomas Whitaker, you are lucky I still leave my porch light on. You need rest, no questions tonight. You can stay in the back room, no locks on the door, and I keep a bat by mine." He gave a faint laugh, more from disbelief than humor. "Thank you," she nodded once, standing. "Dry clothes are in the hallway closet. I will bring you some food." As she walked away, she glanced back. He sat still, staring into the fire with a look she had seen before, on her own face in the mirror years ago. A man who had been betrayed, who was still bleeding somewhere no bandage could reach. No ordinary runaway ended up in a snowstorm wearing a suit worth more than her car. And Sarah, for all her scars, still believed in giving people one last chance. In the days that followed, Thomas kept mostly to himself. He stayed in the small back room Sarah had set up for him, emerged only when meals were served, and never lingered after the dishes were cleared. He walked with his shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to shrink into the background, and he always sat with his back to a wall. Sarah noticed he scanned the room often, eyes flicking to windows, doors, and unfamiliar faces, like someone trained to expect danger. He spoke politely, with a calm tone that made others trust him, but he never said more than necessary. No unnecessary details, no personal stories, just simple thank yous and helpful observations. Still, there was something undeniably human underneath the quiet exterior. After breakfast one morning, Sarah found him on a ladder in the hallway, fixing a flickering light bulb that had annoyed her for weeks. Another day, he spent 2 hours quietly repairing the leaking faucet in the kitchen. When the shelter's old generator stuttered during a cold snap, he had it running again within 30 minutes. The residents started to warm to him. He never looked down on anyone, never acted like he was above them. He helped fold laundry without being asked, offered extra food to the older guests, and once gave his coat to a new arrival who was soaked and freezing. But Sarah saw more than kindness. She saw the way he examined the generator's manual like he had written similar ones, the way he talked about wiring and circuitry with terms most people would never use, the way he glanced at her laptop screen one evening and muttered, "That budget spreadsheet needs a formula correction in column F, totals off by 6 cents. He was not just well-educated, he was precise, experienced, and it only made his silence about the past louder. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah sat at the desk in her office, sorting through donation receipts. The shelter's finances were always on the edge of survival. Her hands were cold from the failing radiator, and the candles flickered against the walls. She considered calling it a night when she heard something. A voice. Not hers. Not anyone in the hallway. "Nicole, you said it would be clean." "Alan, you lied. Don't pretend you did this for me." It was coming from Tomas's room. Sarah stood, heart beating fast. The voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of something deep and broken. She walked down the hallway, paused outside his door, and listened. "I trusted you both. Everything gone." His voice cracked, ragged from sleep but thick with pain. He was dreaming, but this was not just any dream. This was memory, leaking out from the walls he had built. She knocked gently, then opened the door. Thomas was tangled in the blanket, sweat soaking his forehead, his face twisted in agony. "Thomas," she said softly, "you are dreaming. It is okay. Wake up." He jerked upright, gasping for breath. His eyes were wide, wild for a moment, then slowly focused on her face. "Sarah," he muttered, "sorry. You were shouting," she said, keeping her voice calm. "Names. Nicole. Alan." His hands trembled as he ran them through his hair. "Yeah, sorry, I should sleep somewhere else." "You are fine where you are," she said firmly. "Everyone has ghosts. Yours just sound a little louder than most." He looked at her, as if weighing whether to speak. "I do not mean to bring trouble," he said finally. She nodded. "I know." She did not press for more, but before leaving, she paused at the door. "Thomas, whatever you are running from, just know, you do not have to run alone forever." He did not respond. But as she walked away, he whispered a quiet, almost broken thank you. And in that moment, Sarah realized something. Thomas was not just hiding from someone. He was hiding from the version of himself that had believed in people like Nicole and Alan, and some part of him still wanted to believe in someone again. The snow had stopped by the third night, but the cold still clung to the air like a warning. Sarah sat near the fire, sorting through repair bills, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Thomas had not left his room all day. Something about the silence unsettled her. She crossed the hall and knocked. "It's open," came his voice. He was sitting on the edge of his cot, staring at the floor. His hands were clasped, his jaw tight. "I need to tell you who I am," he said. Sarah sat opposite, waiting. My name is Thomas Whitaker. I was CEO of Whitaker Dynamics. The name landed like a weight. Everyone knew it. Tech giant, family empire. I took over after my father passed. Too young, they said. But I built it bigger, better. Then I got engaged to Nicole Harper. She runs a media startup. Everyone called us the golden couple. I believed them. He stood, began pacing. But she and Alan, my best friend and legal advisor, they were planning something. They forged my signature on investment contracts, funneled money into shell companies, and pinned it all on me. Sarah's stomach tightened. If I'd married Nicole, she would have gained legal standing over our shared assets. They timed everything, contracts, press coverage, to fall apart after the wedding, making me the scapegoat. He paused, looking at her. They even leaked fake evidence, emails, documents. Suddenly I was the villain. "Why not go to the authorities?" Sarah asked. I did, but Alan had someone inside. The same day I reached out, he knew. An internal investigation started, but the focus shifted to me, fabricated evidence. I was done if I stayed. So you ran. I had no choice. I had to disappear, figure out what they did, and find proof before they ruined me. The fire outside hissed softly as silence fell. Then Sarah spoke, her voice calm. I lost everything once too. Thomas looked at her. I was a corporate accountant. Someone stole from the company. I reported it and got framed. They used my login, twisted the numbers. I was arrested in front of everyone. Thomas said nothing, but his face darkened. I spent 6 months in prison. No trial. No one believed me. When I got out, I left everything and came here. Built this place from what little I had left. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Don't be. It made me stronger. And if I ever get the chance to pull someone else out of that darkness, I will." She stood, her voice firm. "You're not alone in this, Thomas. If you're ready to fight, I'm with you. Not out of pity, but because I know what it's like to lose everything and still want to believe in something worth saving." Thomas's expression cracked, just a little, not from pain or fear, but something closer to trust. "I don't know what comes next," he said. "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. Together." By the end of the week, the shelter felt warmer, not just from the patched-up heating system Thomas had worked on, but from the unspoken shift between him and Sarah. The raw edge in his voice had softened. The way he looked at her now held something more than guarded gratitude. It held respect. It held trust. They sat together at the kitchen table one morning, the snow outside melting under a rare glimpse of winter sunlight. Thomas stared at his untouched coffee, then glanced up at Sarah. "I need to contact someone, a lawyer I can still trust. She was my father's advisor before she left the firm. Name's Caroline Mendez. I do not know if she will even believe me now." Sarah nodded, already pulling her old laptop closer. "Let's start with that." They created a new email under a false identity, used a virtual private network, and typed a brief, coded message. Sarah double-checked every line before sending it. "I used to do this kind of thing for clients," she said with a faint smile. "Not illegal stuff, just making sure things were airtight." "You were really good at your job, weren't you?" Thomas asked. She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "I was." Over the next few days, they worked side by side, repairing shelves, reorganizing food inventory, even painting over graffiti in the back alley. They made an unlikely team, the fallen tech mogul and the accountant-turned-shelter murder. But somehow, it worked. One afternoon, Sarah drove them into town to restock supplies. At the small local market, Thomas handled the cart while Sarah read off her list. They bickered over peanut butter brands, shared a laugh when he knocked over a stack of canned beans, and even stopped for coffee at the corner cafe. No one recognized him. He wore a beanie pulled low, kept his head down. To the world, he was just a man helping a friend. Back at the shelter, as they unloaded groceries, Sarah finally shared the part of her story she rarely let out. "It happened on a Thursday," she said, wiping her hands on her jeans. "I was reviewing quarterly reports. Something did not add up. I flagged it, followed the trail, and brought it to the CFO. Thomas listened in silence. 2 days later, security walked me out of the office, in handcuffs, in front of everyone. The numbers had been changed, and all the evidence pointed to me. Even my login was used. You did not fight back? I tried, but the real thief knew the system better than I did. My lawyer said I could either take the fall quietly or risk years in court and possibly a longer sentence. I took the plea deal. Thomas's jaw tightened. You did nothing wrong. I know that now, but back then, I questioned everything. My sanity, my choices, my worth. She met his eyes. That is why I recognized it in you, the way you looked the first night. It is the look of someone who had the truth ripped away and replaced with a lie too big to fight alone. He nodded slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. You do not have to thank me, she said. Just promise me, when it is your turn to stand up again, you will not flinch. I will not, he said quietly. Not this time. Later that evening, as the shelter quieted down, an old man named Pete, one of the longtime residents, sat in the common room flipping through a newspaper someone had left behind. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the front page. A small headline in the corner read, Thomas Whitaker still missing. Authorities silent on investigation. Pete's eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back at the paper. He looked again at the grainy photo of Thomas in a tuxedo, then at the man who had just walked past him with a basket of blankets. He reached for his phone and stepped outside. The wind was cold, but the temptation was hotter than loyalty. I think I've found your billionaire, he whispered into the receiver. How much is it worth to you? The building looked the same. Towering glass, spotless steel, the logo of Whitaker Dynamics glowing cold blue above the entrance, but to Thomas, it no longer felt like his. It was past midnight, the city quiet under a layer of snow, the parking structure nearly deserted. Thomas adjusted the cap on his head and glanced at Sarah beside him. She wore a dark hoodie, oversized glasses, and a serious look that could cut through steel. You still sure about this? She whispered. He nodded. The backup servers are on the second sublevel. Caroline said the evidence is stored locally. Emails, signed documents, transaction logs. If we can pull them and get out clean, we can prove everything. Sarah tightened the strap on her bag. Let's make it quick, then. They entered through the old maintenance door. Thomas still remembered the code from his days as CEO, and to his relief, it had not been changed. The door clicked open, revealing a dim hallway that smelled of cold air and cleaning fluid. He led the way, steps light but steady, every nerve on edge. Inside, the corridors were eerily quiet. Security lights blinked overhead, casting long shadows. They reached the elevator, but Thomas shook his head. Too risky. Cameras. Instead, they descended the narrow stairwell to the server level. Each step down felt like a descent into the life he had left behind. When they reached the door to the server room, Sarah pulled out a flash drive encrypted by Caroline's team. Plug this into the root terminal. It'll copy and send everything to a secure cloud vault. Thomas opened the panel and typed quickly, his fingers remembering every keystroke of a system he once designed. The screen lit up and the data began to transfer. He turned to Sarah, breathing hard. We have to hold for 6 minutes, then we're clear. But before she could respond, an alarm suddenly chirped, a soft but sharp beep that grew louder. Thomas froze. Motion sensor. Someone tripped it. Upstairs, a voice crackled over the intercom. Unidentified activity detected in sublevel 2. Security teams deploy immediately. Sarah's eyes widened. We've got to go. Thomas yanked the flash drive the moment the progress bar hit 100%. They bolted into the stairwell, racing upward as the distant echo of boots thundered below. They burst into the underground garage just as headlights snapped on across the lot. A black SUV turned toward them, engine roaring. This way! Thomas grabbed Sarah's hand and darted toward the far exit. The SUV accelerated, closing in fast. A security guard jumped from the passenger side, shouting. Thomas shoved open a side door and pulled Sarah through just as a shot rang out. Rubber bullets, not lethal but enough to knock them flat. The door slammed shut behind them. They ran through the alley behind the building, hearts pounding, breath visible in the freezing air. A high wall loomed ahead. "I can boost you," Sarah said, crouching. "Go!" "No, go!" "Go!" Thomas stepped onto her braced hands and leapt, grabbing the top of the wall. He pulled himself up, then reached down and hauled Sarah over, just as more footsteps echoed behind them. They dropped to the other side, stumbled into the shadows, and kept running until the city swallowed the sounds of pursuit. Minutes later, they ducked into an abandoned maintenance shed behind an old train depot. Thomas leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. Blood stained his sleeve. "You're hit," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "It's nothing," he winced. "Just grazed. Let me see." She tore open the fabric and examined the wound. A shallow cut, already clotting, but it would leave a scar. "You idiot," she muttered, wrapping his arm with a scarf. "Yeah," he breathed, smiling despite the pain. "But we got the files." She nodded, then sat beside him on the concrete floor, silence stretching between them like a held breath. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly. "You didn't have to protect me when that car came at us," she replied. They looked at each other, really looked, and in that moment, something shifted. The trust that had been building for days turned into something deeper. Something unspoken, yet undeniable. "I don't know what this is," Thomas said, his voice hoarse, "but I know I haven't felt it in a long time." Sarah reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his lightly. "Then don't run from it," she whispered. And he didn't. 2 nights after the break-in, Thomas sat in the corner of the shelter's office, staring at a silent phone. A single lamp lit the room, casting long shadows over the desk where Sarah hovered beside a laptop, checking audio settings for the 3rd time. "You really think she'll take the bait?" Sarah asked, not looking up. "She will," Thomas replied. "Nicole's too ambitious to walk away from power. She'll think I'm desperate, that I'm crawling back. And Alan? He's never far behind. She'll loop him in." Sarah nodded, adjusted the gain on the microphone, and looked over at Thomas. "We only get one shot at this." "I know." Earlier that day, Sarah had contacted an old connection, Lena Foster, a fiercely independent investigative journalist with a reputation for taking down corporate giants. Lena had agreed to meet under one condition: proof. Real proof. So, Sarah and Thomas gave her a plan. Now, in the quiet of the office, Thomas took a deep breath and dialed Nicole's number on a burner phone. Sarah hit record. The phone rang once, twice. Then Nicole answered, her voice smooth and calm as silk. "Thomas?" He let out a shaky sigh. "Nicole, Listen, I made a mistake, disappearing like that. I shouldn't have run—" A pause, then cautious curiosity. "Where are you?" "I can't say, but I want to fix this. I know I can't undo what happened, but I don't want to fight anymore. I've been thinking, maybe you and Alan were right." Another pause. Then the tone shifted, confident, intrigued. "Go on." "I have the documents you planted. I know what you two did. But I also know how to make them disappear. We can still move forward, together, if you'll let me." The line went quiet. Sarah glanced at the screen. Recording was clear. Finally, Nicole's voice returned, low and cunning. "You're finally starting to think smart, Thomas. We can make this go away. Alan already made adjustments to the timelines. The audits will match. All we need is your cooperation." "I want back in," Thomas said. "Tell Alan I'll play along. I'll even make a statement, say it was all a misunderstanding, that I panicked." Sarah clenched her fists under the desk. "Good," Nicole replied. "We just needed you to realize who really has control. Come in quietly, and it all disappears." Thomas played it cool. "I'll need a few days to get everything in place." "No problem," Nicole said sweetly. "Just don't vanish again." The line went dead. Thomas stared at the phone, heart pounding. "We got them." Sarah was already copying the file to a flash drive, her hands steady. "Every word. It's all there." An hour later, Lena Foster sat across from them in the shelter's tiny dining room, headphones on, expression growing darker by the second as she listened to the recording. When it ended, she looked up at Thomas and Sarah with quiet fury. This will burn everything down." "Good," Thomas said. Lena nodded. "Give me 24 hours." As she walked out into the night, flash drive clutched in her hand, Sarah turned to Thomas. "No turning back now." "I don't want to," he replied, eyes locked with hers. "Not anymore." And with that, the final piece of their trap fell into place. The news hit the internet like wildfire. Within hours of Lena Foster's expose going live, the story exploded across every major news outlet. The headline was blunt, brutal, and undeniable. Billionaire CEO framed by fiancé and legal partner, secret recording uncovers massive corporate betrayal. The article included audio clips, document screenshots, and a timeline of the fraud scheme. Lena's voiceover narrated with unwavering clarity, exposing Nicole Harper and Alan Royce for who they truly were. Public reaction was immediate and visceral. Nicole's face, once the darling of business magazines and influencer circuits, flashed across screens, accompanied by words like fraud, manipulator, and arrest warrant. Alan Royce, too, was named in full. Both were now officially fugitives, with federal charges including wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The Justice Department confirmed the validity of the evidence and issued arrest warrants that very day. Meanwhile, Thomas Whitaker's name transformed from scandal-ridden CEO to whistleblower and survivor. For days, headlines praised his courage. Thomas Whitaker clears his name in stunning turn of events. Fallen tech heir redeems himself with expose. The man who walked away from power for the truth. Thomas stayed silent. He read the articles, watched the interviews, listened to legal experts dissect the layers of betrayal. But through it all, he stayed inside the shelter, next to the woman who had saved his life, when the world had turned its back on him. Then the press came knocking. Caroline Mendez, his trusted lawyer, arranged a formal press conference, a way to clear the air directly, publicly. She invited Sarah, gently urging her to attend. Thomas asked her himself the night before. They stood outside under a cold sky, stars barely visible above the city's glow. "You should be there," he said softly. "You were there when no one else was." Sarah shook her head slowly. "I was also there when cameras twisted the truth and turned me into a villain. I'm done with the spotlight, Thomas. I don't need the world to know who I am. I just want to live a life that's real." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "I understand." The next day he stood at the podium alone, flashes going off like lightning storms around him. His voice, clear and steady, recounted the timeline of deceit, betrayal, and escape. He answered questions. He thanked the journalists who stayed true to integrity. But when asked if he would return to his position at Whitaker Dynamics, his answer stunned the room. "No," he said, "I won't be returning to the company." Gasps, murmurs, frantic typing. "I've learned that power, no matter how well earned, means nothing without people you can truly trust. My father left me a business, but here," he placed a hand to his chest, "I found something better. Purpose, real connections, a chance to do something that helps people on the ground." The shelter didn't make the headlines, but it became the place Thomas returned to that evening. No security detail, no limo, just him, a duffel bag, and a quiet determination. Sarah was in the kitchen when he walked in. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel, eyes calm but questioning. "You came back," she said. "I never really left," he replied. She leaned against the counter, watching him with a half smile. "And what happens now? You disappear into normal life?" He stepped closer, closing the space between them with a softness that surprised them both. "No," he said. "Now I stay. Not because I'm running, not because I owe anyone anything, but because I want to be here. With you?" Sarah's breath caught, just slightly. "Thomas, I fell in love with you, Sarah. Somewhere between fixing pipes and dodging bullets, I saw you, and I couldn't look away." Her eyes searched his face, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't exactly a fairy tale." He smiled. No, but it's real. And as she stepped into his arms, laying her head against his chest, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was better than any fairy tale, because it had been earned, through truth, through fire, through choosing each other when the world had given them every reason not to, and in that small, quiet shelter, built on second chances and stubborn hope, love didn't need a spotlight to shine. It just needed two people brave enough to hold on. The scent of cinnamon and baked bread filled the air as laughter echoed through the old community center. Twinkling lights lined the windows, casting a golden glow over the long rows of tables, each one set with care. Laughter rang from children chasing each other around stacks of chairs, and the soft hum of music played beneath the joyous chaos. Outside, snow fell in soft flakes, blanketing the streets in silence, but inside, warmth reigned. Sarah stood near the makeshift buffet, helping a young boy scoop mashed potatoes onto his plate. She wore a deep green sweater and a silver pendant shaped like a star, simple, beautiful, and unmistakably her. A year had passed since the stormy night Thomas stumbled into her shelter, bleeding and broken. Since then, everything had changed, and yet, somehow, everything had come full circle. She was now the chief financial officer of the Haven Project, a nonprofit founded by Thomas after stepping away from Whitaker Dynamics. Together, they had expanded from one shelter to 6, scattered across the state, each one modeled after the values they both held dear: dignity, trust, and second chances. Thomas had taken to his new life with quiet joy. Gone was the man who once signed multi-million-dollar contracts in penthouse boardrooms. Now he showed up in work boots and rolled-up sleeves, handing out coats and rebuilding broken heaters. And through it all, he stayed by Sarah's side, not as a man who needed redemption, but as one who had found purpose. Tonight was their first annual Christmas celebration for the residents of all 6 shelters. More than 200 people filled the room, eating, laughing, healing. The success was visible in every smile, every grateful glance. Thomas found her near the stage where volunteers were handing out mugs of cider. "You disappeared on me," he said with a grin, slipping a hand into hers. "You were too busy winning over the entire room." "Guilty," he said. "But I have something for you." She raised an eyebrow. "Now? Now?" He led her outside, just beyond the glow of the lights, where the snow drifted quietly around them. The air was cold but not biting, peaceful. From his coat pocket, Thomas pulled out a small velvet box, not dramatic, not flashy, just honest. Sarah looked at it, her breath visible in the cold. "Thomas, it's not an engagement ring," he said gently, opening the box. Inside was a silver band, etched with delicate patterns, resembling shelter rooftops and stars. It sparkled subtly under the light from the windows. "This isn't to possess you," he said. "It's not to claim you or bind you. It's a promise." She looked up at him, her eyes soft, heart steady. "A promise that I'll stay," he continued, "that no matter what happens, good, bad, ordinary, I won't run, not from this, not from us." Her eyes welled up as she reached out and touched the ring. "You're ridiculous," she whispered. "Is that a yes?" he asked, smiling. She took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger, then she laced her fingers with his. "I didn't need a ring to know you'd stay," she said, "but I'm glad you gave me one anyway." From inside, the sound of church bells began to ring, the shelter's old antique chime, now restored and rung by a little girl in a red scarf, who laughed with each toll. Sarah leaned into him, resting her head against his chest as the bells sang through the air. Two people the world had once cast aside now stood hand in hand, surrounded by the warmth of the life they'd built. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and lasting, and in that moment, beneath the snow and the stars and the soft chime of hope, happiness finally stayed. And so, from a snowy Christmas night to a year filled with healing, trust, and second chances, Sarah and Thomas found something neither of them expected. Love born not from fairy tales, but from truth, resilience, and choosing each other every day. Because sometimes, The most powerful kind of love is the one that stays when the world walks away. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where every tale is a journey of hope, healing, and the beautiful strength of the human spirit. We bring you real stories that move the soul and maybe, just maybe, change a life. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.